1 minute. Okay, so now we're recording. So Bruce, why don't you get us started?
Okay, first, is Pat with us?
Yes, I am.
Good.
I'm
Notice I
with you,
say,
but I'm in a car, Bruce.
oh, I
I'm in
take
a
the
car
liberty,
'cause
I
I'm-
take the liberty of calling her Pat, not Dr. Wright. I can't see anybody, but I guess I'll see everybody in a few minutes. I read about Pat, I guess a few years ago. And I invited her into my class, and she very politely came in and was absolutely fascinating. And so much so that a few years later, people asked if I could have her come back in again, some of the very same people. And what I like to say is in between Dr. Wright and myself, we have one Macarthur Genius Foundation Award. Of course, she did all the heavy lifting. I had nothing to do with it. When Pat starts telling us about the best practices for primate health and conservation, the thing I would love for her to do, if she has time, I would love for her to tell the amazing story of how she became not only a primatologist, but if you Google her, you'll see she's one of the leading primatologists on the entire planet. And few of us have the opportunity to really change the world. Very, very few people can do that. Sometimes big time politicians, but there are some people that change the world somewhat. And Pat has actually is one of the people that have changed the world. And I'll stop talking, and Pat, you'll take over. And if you can, I'd love to hear some. I know the story, but I think people would be fascinated with the story. What brought you to this? So please start. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pat, you've frozen.
I'm going to text her. Give me a minute.
I appreciate that. I recommend everybody. All of you for inviting me here today to talk about COVID in Madagascar. I haven't changed the whole world so much, but I think I have changed some things in Madagascar. And I never thought I would be saying that, because when I was a little girl in upstate New York, I didn't even know where Madagascar was. I mean, I was like, in my dreams, I was dreaming that someday I'd go farther south, because I was up near Buffalo where it snows all the time. Someday I would go maybe as far south as New Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
And my dream came true. My dream came true. And so I was a biology major, and I really, really loved animals since the very beginning of my lifetime. And I didn't consider that there was any kind of a job studying animals other than being a veterinarian. And I decided that's not what I wanted to be. So instead, I went into something called social work. I started out my career after undergraduate to be a human, work with humans, with people in Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, I was a social worker in Brooklyn, and I learned a lot about, little girl from upstate New York. I learned a lot about people, about how people think, and about how people are. But then after that, I had my daughter, actually, my daughter named Amanda. And I also, at the same time, a little bit earlier, had I guess you might call it a son. I was, those are the old days, you remember the 60s. and how it was amazing if you got to go to the more east and hear all these wonderful bands like Stores and the Cream and Janis Joplin and all of them. And one day we had tickets to see Jimi Hendrix, and it was in the Fillmore East, and across the street from the Fillmore East there was a pet store called the Fish and Chips Pet Store. And I went across and I fell in love because there was a monkey in that pet store that changed my life. I asked the pet store owner, what does it eat? What does it do? It was a cute little animal from South America. When I put my finger in his cage, he grabbed onto it and looked into my eyes, and I was a goner. I ended up doing my PhD dissertation on that monkey. But what really got me asking the questions was after I had Amanda, my daughter, and my monkey also, who I had gone to South America and gotten him a wife, and they had a baby girl too. But the difference between my situation, remember the 70s, remember the wives stayed home with the kids and the husbands all went off to work. Remember that? And they didn't pay much attention to any kids at all, and certainly not their own, not so much. It wasn't. And so when I started to observe this monkey family, I noticed it was really different. My husband was going off to work every day, and I was taking care of Amanda all day long. In their family, it was the dad who was taking care of the kids. It was just like amazing. There was one little baby girl, and she would be on her mother to drink milk, and then as soon as she was finished nursing, like 3 minutes, the mother would the baby cry, and sure enough, would come over and take care of her for the rest of the time until it was nursing time again. This was like, to me, phenomenal, because I knew about Jane Goodall, and I knew about the chips and the mother of child offspring, mother infant offspring care, and I knew all about that. And I knew about baboons, and I knew about mother care and baboons. Gene Altman had written a book about that, but I didn't know that there was any kind of a primate, any kind of relationship that had dads taking care of the kids like 95% of the time. It was amazing. And I realized that this was an important finding. It was important because of the sexual revolution that was happening at this time, where females were saying they didn't want, or women were saying they didn't want to just stay at home, that they wanted to enter the workforce, that they wanted to share the duties of working in childcare. I knew this was really knew that this was something that is common, or not common, but it occurs in our primate cousins, in our evolutionarily distant relatives. So I wrote to Jane Goodall and asked, please, contact. And I said to National Jane Goodall. So they said the National Geographic funded me, and they said, you don't have a PhD. We only fund people with PhDs. So then I called up my mom and I said, Mom, I don't know what to do. I can't really find out about this involved in a way that you can figure out how a system really evolves, is to look at it in nature. I want to go down to the Amazon where they're from. I want to watch what makes this nocturnal monkey different than the other animals that have female care, mother care, instead of father care. And she said, well, my mother was a scientist too, but she had 6 kids and she had to give up her science to take care of us. And my mom said, okay, we will find somebody that'll fund it. What about Nancy Mulligan? She took a chance on a crazy idea a while ago, You know, I'm from Rochester, New York. And I said, oh, maybe she'd take a chance on my project. And that's when my mom said yes. So she got an appointment with with Nancy Mulligan, who had taken a chance on George Eastman and Kodak. And now, maybe if you know, remember Kodak was the number one in film. You know, the old-fashioned kind of film when you took pictures with a camera, and you had film camera. Okay, so Nancy did very well because she owned more than 50% of the stock. So she had a little bit of extra money, and she was going to fund my project. I don't know how much time we have because it's a long story. Let me just say, I, she actually did eventually give me the money. I did go down to the Amazon. I did get the answer to the questions about why the dad was taking care of the kids because of big predators that were chasing both mother and father, and the mother because she's produced has to produce so much milk. Um, she needs all her energy to just to be able to survive. While the dad, who isn't producing all that milk, could carry the baby and save it from the predators. All right, so I come back, and uh, and then Warren Kinsey from City University of New York. I took him my my project and my notes and everything, and he said, you know, this is amazing that you could actually do this. Can you go to graduate school? You have to go to graduate school. Nobody will believe you unless you go to graduate school. And I said, no, I don't want to go to graduate school. You know, I was already working, you know, before Amanda, and Amanda was getting old enough so that I could work again. And he said, no, in order to really do what you really want to do, which is study the behavioral ecology of monkeys, you have to have a PhD. I said, I, no, I've been out of school for 10 years. I'm not smart anymore. I said that. I said, I'm not smart anymore. What a girl thing to say. And he said, well, why don't you just, you know, take those GREs. And of course, I did okay on my GREs. I got accepted everywhere. And I started graduate school. I went down to the Amazon. I brought my beautiful little daughter, who by this time was 7 years old, and she also spent time in the rainforests of the Amazon, facing down jaguars and spirit lances and all the things that I did. She didn't do because people were watching out for her. Anyway, got my PhD, and then one day I got a telephone call, and it was from the director of the Duke Primate Center. And he said, I need you, like Uncle Sam. And I didn't know what to say back because I didn't had never met him. And it was on the telephone, you know, the landlines that we used to have. And and I said, Dr. Simons, excuse me. He said, well, no, I've heard rumors about you. I know that you study nocturnal monkeys, and I want you to help me. I have an NSF grant to study tarsiers in Borneo. And I've sent five men over to Borneo to catch me tarsiers and bring them back to the United States of America. It would be the first time that we had them here in the United States. They all failed me, but they say that you will be able to help me out and bring back those tarsiers. Please, he said. He actually said please. And I said, I talked to my advisor. I said, I just got back from the Amazon. I have all my data. I have to write a PhD dissertation. You talk to my advisor. My advisor calls me back. He said, Duke University, it's a great place to get a job. You know, it's really important, I think, for you to take this job. So I went to Duke, Durham, North Carolina, and I started my first job before I got my PhD. Don't let any of your students, I'm sure you didn't, do that. But anyway, I arrived in 3 months, I was in Borneo. I captured those tarsiers. I brought them back. He said, go back and get some from the Philippines, a different species. So I went to the Philippines and brought them back. And then he said, how about Madagascar? You know, I'd eventually get here, right? He said, how about Madagascar? And I said, I know where Madagascar is. I know that lemurs are from there. He said, but what about this lemur? And he showed me a picture of it was a drawing of a lemur. And I said, I don't know what lemur that is. And he said, it's because nobody's seen this lemur for 50 years. It might be extinct. If you have to go to Madagascar and find out whether it's extinct. I said, okay. But of course, I was going to go to Madagascar just this one time, just like I went to the Philippines one time and I went to Borneo one time. And when I flew over Madagascar, I thought, oh my God, it's such a sad place. Because Madagascar, which is the fourth largest island in the world, was once covered with rainforest, and it now is 90% of the rainforest is gone. And I had just been in the Amazon, you know, I really loved rainforest. I loved mile after mile of that, you know, rug of green. That's just amazing. But that's not what I saw when I got to Madagascar. So I plan to just go and try to find that lemur and get out. Now that lemur, as I said, was critically endangered or maybe extinct. So I went back to the records, the historical records, to see where those lemurs had come from, that species. And then I went there. Of course, Dr. Simons didn't explain to me that the roads in Madagascar were just almost non existent. I don't know if you've ever been on the worst roads in America, the back roads without, you know, probably the back roads of North Carolina are clay and muddy and difficult. So maybe, you know, there are something comparable. But anyway, I spent a lot of time digging out the 4x4 that we had, along with my graduate students from Duke. And eventually we became very, very discouraged. And when we hadn't been finding these lemurs at the places where they had been last seen, we had been breathing in cold water streams, and all of a sudden we came to a sign that said Hot Mineral Springs. And I thought, yes, we can get a bath, a hot bath. And I stopped at that hotel, got out of the car, and went up to the door, and there were people there. It was a real hotel. It wasn't, you know. And so when we took the bath, because that's all we were thinking about. But in the morning, when I looked in back of this hotel, I saw rainforest, a nice rainforest, and I asked to maybe come up and if I could get into the forest, and they said yes. So we went into the forest, and it was absolutely beautiful. It was just like the Amazon. I've never seen a forest like that. And we started camping, and that's when one early morning, when it was rainy and misty, we're walking along the trail, and suddenly we heard a noise. I swear it sounded like a motor or something. It was like a growling, purring sound. And then I looked over toward the sound, and there was this animal that was twirling his tail at me and looking very angry while he was making this very aggressive sound. And then suddenly he was in the bamboo. He suddenly took off, and I thought, wow, what an amazing creature. He was like golden color, beautiful, beautiful animal. And he was in the bamboo, and he had been eating bamboo. And so I thought, maybe this is the greater bamboo lemur that I had come to find. But I was wrong, wrong, wrong. Because within 2 weeks, we found the real greater bamboo lemur. And we realized that this first animal that I had seen was a species new to science. I mean, you know, it's the size of your cat. And it was a brand new species of lemur. Amazing. It was all over the New York Times. You know, everybody was all excited about it, especially me. And I went back to study it because there were two species, both of them, which were in in this rainforest, and they were both eating bamboo. so I studied kind of what they were doing differently, because you can't have two species doing exactly the same thing. And that's when the timber exploiters came in, the loggers came in and started chopping down those trees. They did it all by hand with an axe. But it was so sad to see, and I got very, very upset. I was crying and I was like yelling, and usually a fairly calm person, but when you see something like that and realize that these animals who were just so recently discovered were going to go extinct, it really made me upset. So I went to the Capitol, talked to the director of Water and Forest, told him that we really needed to save this area, this protected area. And he said, yes, Madam Patricia, it's good that you've discovered this new species, and I appreciate the value. But, he said, but, we don't have any money. This is Madagascar. We are the poorest country, maybe in the world. And we just don't have the money to do something like uh, put in a national park. I mean, national park costs lots of money. I mean, you have to map it, you have to make the boundaries, you have to train the rangers. No, we don't have that money. But if you find the money, we'll make the park. And that's when that's when I got four. Well, anyway, so I said no, I couldn't do it. I was just an assistant professor at Duke University. And then I thought about it, and I realized, oh dear, this is really, I mean, if I don't do it, nobody's going to do it. And if nobody does it, the park, then we will have animals that are going extinct. My lemur that I discovered is going to go extinct, and the one we thought was extinct was really going to go extinct, and I got very upset. And that's the minute when I realized that I was a conservationist and that I had to save those animals, even if I didn't get tenure. So I found the $4 million from USAID. I realized that wasn't enough, so I got Liz Claiborne, the fashion designer, got her to chip in another $500,000 for our health team. Then I went to, by that time, I am a Macarthur fellow, and I got a Macarthur grant to chip in for the education team. And then pretty soon we had a national park. And it was inaugurated in 1991, May. It's a long time ago now. And then after that, it actually became a World Heritage Site in 2007. The lemurs are saved, and I invite you all to come see them after COVID. So now I'm going to just transition into talking about COVID and the changes that has made, and and how discouraging it has been in these last 2 years. Because in March 2020, when we first realized how serious COVID was, I was in Madagascar. And I got thrown out of Madagascar March 20th, 2020, because the president of Madagascar said, we're closing the doors to all foreigners because we don't want to get COVID. So I left Madagascar to come back to the States. And I thought it would be 3 months. I thought it would be 6 months. But now we know it's been over a year and we don't see an end in sight. So I thought in January of 2020, in February of 2020, I was so proud because in that national park, we actually had something that I had promised in 1991, but didn't know was going to happen for sure. That was tourism. We went up from 0 tourists in 1991 to 45,000 tourists a year in 2020. 45,000 times pay $20 to get in the park, and you then get a chance to have that money goes to being the animal, half the money goes back. So we had a direct impact on the economics of the people, the local villages. And so
Dr. Wright, you need to unmute yourself. Something happened and you're not muted. And you're muted.
okay, what was the last thing you heard? Right? Did you hear about how COVID changed
You mentioned
everything that was
you,
going on in
we were
Madagascar?
losing you when you were talking about the numbers of people, 45,000, and then your PowerPoint went off.
That's right. Oh dear. Okay, so 45,000 people were coming to Madagascar. Each one pays 20,000 to get, pays equivalent of $20 to get into the park. And then another, and 10 of those dollars goes back to the villagers. So the villagers themselves actually have a stake. And they were receiving an economic benefit for saving the lemurs. And then suddenly everything changed. There were 32 hotels in the area in the beginning of 2020. And most of them have been closed. All of them have been closed because there's no more tourism. You can imagine for the economy of Madagascar. And that's makes it difficult. So, so there are real economic problems resulting from COVID in Madagascar. And what does that mean for the lemurs? And part of what it means for the lemurs is has to do with the fact that people who now don't have any way to make a living are suddenly doing what they would never have thought that they would do, which is enter the forest and start to hunt lemurs again, starting to slash down trees and return to their old ways of life, because it's the only way that they can really stay alive. So it's a real issue. It's a real issue. Very, very difficult right now in Madagascar, even though they didn't have a lot of COVID there. It wasn't actually having COVID that was the threat. The problem was the stopping of tourism and the stopping of income for the local people, which they had grown to rely on, and instead of hunting lemurs and chopping down forests. Okay, so that now I'm going to switch right now to a talk that was originally given by Tom Gillespie, who was a professor I work with at Emory. And he, our first question was, do our closest ancestors get COVID? I mean, do they? Because they can catch colds from us, they can catch flu from us. And so we looked at what went on with the great apes. See if we can. Amanda, Ariana. So we have best practices in disease prevention and health monitoring and disease surveillance. What way can we keep our closest ancestors, our closest relatives, the great apes, from catching disease like they do? And part of it is and you know that, you know, should we vaccinate them? I mean, what should we do? Do they catch it? Do we know? We don't know. So Tom and his team from Emory University went to West Africa, East Africa, and West Africa, and set up this set of rules saying, you know, keep your distance at least 7 meters from those great apes that you're observing. Always wear a mask so that the great apes can't catch the COVID. And you yourself, as a researcher, should be healthy if you're having vaccinated. So now the rules say that vaccinated people are the only people that can follow the great apes. So they had an employee health, like for example, the Jane Goodall's chimps. I mean, she has like, I think 35 people who are watching her chimps now. And at Ranmafan National Park, where we have lemurs, we have about 30 people following the lemurs, but then we have other people that are doing the health, the education, the reforestation, and we have 12 species of lemurs. And so we have many, many other people studying there. So they too have started to be vaccinated before they're allowed. Now, there was an article in Nature that talked about, now you see this is March 24th, 2020. I had just come back from Madagascar when this paper came out, and it was about COVID-19, protect great apes during human pandemics. And, you know, IUCN, which is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, is like the United Nations protection of nature. And under IUCN, WWF was born. So, you know, the conservation movement worldwide, globally, started in 1948. And we are still working together with IUCN to help save the animals of this of this planet. Okay, there's a subgroup called Wildlife Health Specialist Group. So they got this paper out that describes the way that you should approach great apes if you study them or if you're a local village person. And it's, of course, not just a threat to the apes. This COVID can be actually contracted by many, many of our very close relatives, all those monkeys that are in Asia and in Africa. And there's an orangutan. And it's frightening to think of us and how we have, so many people have died with COVID, and then to think that even our close relatives are also threatened and vulnerable to these problems. And so then we said, what about the lemurs? These are lemurs, and you know, I'm sure you know that they only occur in Madagascar. I've been working there since the 80s, and since I arrived in Madagascar right after we created a national park in 1991. I arrived to Stony Brook. So I've been working both at Stony Brook and in Madagascar a very long time. So what we did was we tried to find out whether there was a risk to lemurs. Could they catch the COVID? Did they have that ACE2 connection, genetic connection? And we found out, yes, that they do. And some do and some don't, is what we actually found out, looking at their genes, looking at the genetics, because we have previous studies where we could look fairly quickly at the genomes of different lemurs. And remember the SARS, the SARS that we had before, and MERS and SARS that came before COVID-19. We had already set up labs to look at this close relative of the COVID-19 and found out that they're susceptible to all three. And then we did a lot of studies, who is most susceptible, and we found out even in monkeys, it's not the young monkeys that catch these diseases, these viruses. but it's mostly the old ones. So we have that in common with the primates. And then they started looking at the pathological changes in the lungs, and sure enough, they're almost the same as what happens in humans. And SARS, actually, the COVID-2 actually created pneumonia in Rhesus macaques. Rhesus macaques are monkeys from Asia. You can look at that. And then they have many of the same symptoms as humans do. 100% of the macaques had an increase in body temperature after they were inoculated with the SARS, but only it varied from species to species. So you had only 33% of a different kind of macaque, the long-tailed macaques, as opposed to the rhesus macaques. And then they inoculated the tamarins from South America, and they had no symptoms, no increased body temperature, no symptoms whatsoever. So that's from the very beginning, we knew that there could be differences in different species of monkeys and apes. These are the chests. They can have different places and things. And then they're looking at the viruses, all the different results there. So for non-human primates, we find out that the viral shedding, that's the upper respiratory, seems to spew out this incredible virus, all of them. And it peaked at 6 to 8 days after they got the disease. And they had all the same kind of things that we do, except for and they tracked it down to the ACE2 receptors, that the ACE2 receptors that we have, that some of us have particular receptivity to these kinds of lung problems. They had them too. Now this is, my goodness, it really is too much to even look at, but it shows that you have some animals, some primates, this is all the primates and more than primates. There's even dogs and cats and pigs on this list, that some animals don't get the COVID at all, and others do. Homo sapiens as humans, and we get it. The macaques get it. But when you get down to the lemurs, right here, they're predicted to have a high susceptibility. That was scary because, the lemurs that I study, the shafakas, the jumping lemurs, are on that list as being highly susceptible. And the that's the most amazing creature on Earth, and I think it's actually from Mars. The Pneumonia, the also had a susceptibility to it. And so when you're talking about humans, that we have how many billion of us on Earth? When you're talking about lemurs, you have, some species only have 1,000 left. Some species 17 left. If they get some of these diseases, they're going to get wiped out forever and go extinct. So we began to realize that we had to take some severe precautions. And so we started to think about it. And here are the minks. You've heard that minks can catch COVID, and just started wiping them all out. That's very bad. And we're worried about our non-human primate friends who are even closer related to us. Okay, so we're worried. So what are we going to do about it? We know that lemurs can catch diseases. They have the susceptibility. They have that link in their genes to be able to link into that SARS virus. And, what are we going to do? I mean, we know this now. So what we did is we leaped into action. And everybody that's working for the Center for Bio, which is the Stony Brook University Research Campus in Madagascar, they started to work towards saving humans and lemurs together. We have a women's weaving group there that makes beautiful scarves. And so they had all these sewing machines. We bought more sewing machines and they started to make masks. This is well before the government was providing masks. We made 10,000 masks. And I have to thank Stony Brook and their people for over in the communications and TV and communications department, because they had me make a video and we raised money with that video to help to make masks and to do all the other things that we were doing. So in order to protect the lemurs, in order to protect the people, we started working hard. And we raised this money. In the back there, you see those big sacks of rice, and in those, in the over there, we have purchased rice, beans, and all kinds of things with the money we raised from the Stony Brook video to be able to feed the people that were suffering from the problem of no ecotourists were there. We helped feed the tourist guides because they were starting to be starving. And we helped feed some of the people that used to work in restaurants and no longer did in hotels. And then we got our women together to start sewing, and we started sewing masks, and the guys were putting together the designs of the masks, and it was absolutely, we made 10,000 masks. And then we got the whole villages. This is the mayor. And we knew that we needed hand sanitizers, and we didn't know how we're going to get enough because we have like 50,000 villagers around the park. And so we also knew that, you know, hand sanitizers are mostly alcohol, right? And we knew that we could produce hand sanitizers because we knew we could produce moonshine. So we went to the stills, to the villages that produced the best moonshine, and we bought it all with this money we'd raised. And we changed it into hand sanitizer so people wouldn't drink it. So instead of drinking moonshine, they're actually washing their hands with it and sanitizing everything in their house with it. So that was, you know, it involved the whole village getting together and doing this. And there are the hand sanitizers inside these canisters that we bought. Usually have gasoline in them, but now they have things that you can wash with. And that's our medical team. Our medical team, we got gloves and we got masks, and we went to the villages and we helped them with their respiratory problems if they got COVID. The government closed all of the roads, just closed down the roads, and everybody got PPE, and they took the temperatures of everybody that passed on the road. There's only 2 roads in Madagascar. One goes north and south. And this was a major road going to the East Coast and passed by our research station. And so we checked everybody. They couldn't drive any farther if they had a fever or any kind of symptoms. Yeah, you can see, I mean, there was a lot of people they had to check every day, but they did it. So we could keep COVID out on the human side. They closed the airports, they closed the roads, they contact traced everybody. They kept that. That first wave of COVID was snuffed out in Madagascar. Madagascar has about 23 million people, so it was a big task. What did we do with the lemurs? Just a second, I'll get to that. You see how people cluster together in the market? Well, we went out and we started to tell the people that they couldn't be so close together, that they had to wear masks. And we did it with local governments at the market. This is a market where we were telling them first about COVID and how deadly it was and how important it was for them to social distance. But I showed this because you could see what a problem it is for the Malagasy people who are used to being together to socially distance. So in the beginning, we had only about 120 deaths a day and something like that. A lot of people in treatment. Deaths right here, this deaths, deceased is 0. Nobody was dying. Some of them caught it, a lot of them caught it, but nobody was dying. So here you have the confirmed, this is our 121 for that day, but nobody died. Now, it's not like nobody died, but they do die. But remember, April 2020 in the States, and we were like 8,000 people were dying in New York a day, something like that. It was quite different. But we were able to keep COVID away for a very long time. So what about the lemurs? We closed the national parks. Every park was closed so that nobody would bring in the disease. Tourist guides, well, there wasn't any tourists, so even the tourist guides didn't go inside, but even researchers. My researchers are Malagasy and were there. They weren't allowed to go in, so we had no idea what was happening inside the forest for almost a year. And so so far, we have found no cases of COVID actually in Ranmafan in our park, but we have had some of our people come down with it. In October, 7 people from the research station. Remember, I told you we have 133 people that work there, but only 7 people, close friends, working together. They all came down with it. Out of the 7, only 1 had severe problem breathing. The rest of them we're doing okay. They were in quarantine for 14 days. How do we know that we have COVID if you're kind of feeling fine? All those 7 lost their sense of smell. And when they lost their sense of smell, we of course tested them immediately. And we started testing everybody. And that's very important, but you can't test the lemurs. So that creates a problem. You can maybe detect the virus in their feces, as we found out later that you can detect some of the virus in urine and feces. But we weren't allowed in the park, so we couldn't do that. So it becomes a very, it's a catch-22. I mean, we're not going into the park because we don't want them to get, how do we know whether they have COVID or not? We just don't know. So it's, this is what we've been doing. And I know it kind of stops on a grim note because COVID has just increased as it has in India. COVID in Madagascar is on the upswing. And while we had nobody dying for such a long, long time, we're starting to get people, it's the variant from South Africa. We're starting to get some deaths. So, so international airports are closed again. I can't go to Madagascar. And I'm worried. I'm really worried. I'm hoping that everything will go well. They've closed the roads. They've locked down the Tana. The international airport is closed, and maybe they can beat it back one more time because they did that in April and May of last year. Okay, so I would love to answer questions. I can answer questions about lemurs, our distant cousins. I can answer questions about COVID in Madagascar, whatever you'd like to ask.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. I don't see any questions in the chat, but why don't we open it up? See Sanford has a question. If you want to unmute yourself, they raised their hand.
Yes, I'm wondering if they've gotten the vaccine in Madagascar.
That's such a good question. If you had asked me 2 days ago, I would have said no, because we have a president who actually developed his own remedy for COVID. It's called COVID Organics. And it's sort of like echinacea, which is a sort of, it's a malaria treatment. And so he said he was never going to get the vaccine in his country, which was so scary. Because of course, this COVID organic has not been tested at all. But yesterday he came out, the first vaccines will be, and said, yes, he was going to accept vaccines. The first vaccines are coming next week. And then by July, there will be 4 different kinds of vaccinations available to the Malagasy people. The richest man in Madagascar, this is big news. The richest man in Madagascar has promised that he is giving 1 million vaccines. He's paying for 1 million vaccines to come into Madagascar and be distributed free, which is really good news because the richest man in Madagascar made a lot of his fortune on vanilla. I mean, you probably know that Malagasy vanilla is the best vanilla in the world. And this guy has got total control over the vanilla market in the north, where the best vanilla comes from. And he has just donated 1 million vaccinations to Madagascar free.
That's great. That's great. Bruce asked a question. When were you at the center last?
Okay, I snuck in. You know, I went in just after New Year's 2021. I went in on a humanitarian flight. There's a flight into Madagascar that was going on Saturdays that were to bring humanitarian aid into Madagascar. And I was allowed, I got special permission to go in on that flight. So I was there for the whole month of January. And that's when I had a chance. They opened up the national parks and I had a chance to actually go in the forest and see lemurs. And it was so funny because these animals hadn't seen people for almost a year, right? Suddenly there we are. And they come down and they're looking at us. I thought they'd run away, but they came down. And then I realized we have masks on. We don't look the same as we used to look. They're trying to check out we smelled the same, I'm sure, but we weren't looking the same. And so one of my questions was, are they going to become unhabituated with researchers not there? But they didn't, so that was good. And are they sick? And we counted all of the groups and everybody was there. So I would say that they don't have COVID. We looked at their feces and we didn't find any signs of virus. So that was all good news. And as I said, there was hardly any COVID in Madagascar at that time, but you know, you always have to check. Then I came back here to teach because, as you all know, I teach at Stony Brook and I teach in the spring semester.
Mm-hmm. Linda, did you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to know if anyone's watching the lemurs now. Is there anyone there doing it because the parks are closed?
Yeah, they are closed, but they just opened up, and my teams had watched them last week, and they're doing okay. I mean, it's really good. But now suddenly we have more COVID in the country. The president's going to close down the national parks again, so we're not going to know. I mean, he's doing it to protect the lemurs.
Yeah.
But hard.
There's a
Will
question.
the people get the
vaccines, yeah, or are they anti-vaxxers?
I think they will, you know, the president said, well, we don't need the vaccines because I have the secret. And the Malagasy people are terrified that they'll get, and they're not anti-vaxxers. They say, fine. I mean, the reason why he had to change his tune was because the people were starting to get very angry about him saying, no, we don't need vaccines. So I have a feeling, I will find out because the vaccines aren't there, but I don't think there's very many anti-vaxxers in Madagascar.
Where's the uptick in the COVID coming from? If they've shut the country down, where is it coming in
They-
from?
They opened it up for a very
for that-
short time.
Oh,
They came in from France, and then there was also a couple people must have arrived from South Africa. And that's, just, you don't need many people. And then we have a social system that means everybody really likes to be together, often at weddings, of course, and at funerals and all the places that humans like to gather. So that's how it happened.
mm. So it's not just affecting the lemurs, it's affecting the gorillas as well? Oh, I think you froze, Pat. Yeah.
The gorillas are much more of a problem because they have tried to shut off all research to the gorillas, and that everybody was worried about that. So now they have masks and PPE like you're going into a hospital when you're studying gorillas. And what Jane Goodall is trying to do is get the chimps and gorillas vaccinated. So that's a big effort that, I mean, these animals, they weigh like hundreds of pounds and they're stronger, 10 times stronger than we are. So you have to put them down with the anesthetic, and then, then you vaccinate them and then you let them go. But that's a big effort and it's very difficult.
Wow, she's trying to get them vaccinated. That's amazing.
Yep. Yeah.
Sanford, you had a question? You have to unmute, Sanford.
Unmuted. Dr. Wright, number one, this is absolutely fascinating. I just love every second of it. But I'm curious, in case of animals going extinct, are they collecting DNA for future use?
That's a very important question too, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get, I would, to tell you the truth, I think we're trying to get the genomics of the whole ecosystem. There's not only lemurs who are highly endangered, but the carnivores are highly endangered, and the birds are endangered, and the frogs and everything.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do right now, we've got a project that's just at the beginning, working with Chan Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg, but his wife's name is Priscilla Chan. And they have a foundation, and we're working with them to see if we can get the genomics. Genomics is, all the genes of the whole ecosystem, which I know sounds like I'm really overstepping. I try to discover a new species, try to make a national park, try to make a World Heritage Site, and now we're trying to get the genomics of everything in that rainforest. It's a real challenge, but if we can go to Mars, we can do it.
Mhm.
So we're gonna try our best. So that's a secret. You're not supposed to tell anybody, but
Thank you.
and so if we can get the genomics, yes, we will be saving DNA. We will be saving from all these different species.
Wait, we
So
can't hear you well.
They do go extinct. Bring them back, but we're going to try very hard.
Can everybody hear her?
No,
Pat's volume dropped off.
Yeah.
Pat, if someone were to ask you if human beings have been good stewards of this planet, how would you answer them?
I think she froze.
yeah.
I thought she was actually in Madagascar driving.
So did I.
No, the reception was so poor.
No. Dr. Wright, yeah.
Can you hear me, Pat?
Can you all hear me again?
Now
Yeah.
I can.
Now we can.
Pat, I have a question for you.
Okay.
If someone were to ask you if human beings have been good stewards of the planet? How would you answer?
I'm afraid we have not been very good stewards of the planet. And I really worry. I don't just worry about Madagascar, I worry about the whole planet. And I look at Madagascar as sort of the cutting edge of extinction. We've already had 17 species of giant lemurs that go extinct, and you know, so much of that rainforest is gone. And so if we can save Madagascar, we could probably save the rest of the planet. But right now we're heading down a very bad road. You know, when you have all these animals that are on the brink of extinction, it just means that they're first. It means that soon all those animals in the Amazon and all those animals in Africa, and pretty soon all those animals on Long Island, you know, we have to wake up before it's too late and start thinking about the air we breathe. And then it comes from forests, especially tropical forests. We have to think about all of the the global warming that's happening because of the carbon issue. We really do have to seriously think about what we're doing to the planet and how we can, you know, change things, make it restoration. I mean, I'm here on Cape Cod. I don't know that I explained to everybody, but the reason why this is all kind of strange and I started out in a car is because I'm babysitting my grandchildren in Cape Cod. Well, my daughter and her husband are up in Boston. He's just had surgery for cancer. So, so I have to pick up my grandson at school, and that's what we did together today. And so on the way, we passed turkeys that are walking across the road. I come from upstate New York. I lived in the countryside. I never saw a wild turkey. They were extinct up where I came from. They were extinct in a lot of places. And then now they're coming back. And that gives me hope that even though we've been bad stewards of the planet, that we can wake up and say, oh dear, and we can do restoration and restoration ecology. And we can get these species back, and we can get rainforest to grow in places where it used to grow and isn't there anymore. So, you know, I'm optimistic and hopeful that we can, and stopping those diseases from coming, you know, those viruses. I just had dinner with Liliana Davalos. She studies viruses in bats. She's a Stony Brook professor. I said to Liliana after a glass of wine, I said to her, well, do you think there's any more pandemics up the line? I mean, do you have any indication from the bats that whether this is the last terrible disease that we're going to have? And she just looked at me and laughed. And she said, I know 7 kinds of viruses that could slip over and be caught by humans. I said, what? She said, yeah, there's lots of them that can become pandemics. The problem is we're cutting down rainforest and the animals are coming closer in contact with humans, and people are eating them. And, you know, they're getting the viruses in a variety of ways. And I said, oh, no, I mean, it's so depressing. And I drank another glass of water. I think all of us have to become better stewards of our planet so we can prevent
in Port
some of this to
Jefferson,
happen.
just recently, they tore down, I would have to estimate it was about 100 acres across from Amsawag High School to build more apartments.
Oh,
And everybody, I've been on Long Island since I was a young kid. I've been here my whole life almost. And I never saw deer, and I certainly never saw a turkey, but I used to see pheasants, and the deer are all over the place now. And I have to think it's because they have no place else to live. So they're encroaching, and they're bringing ticks with them. And
we're getting lots of these.
Somebody suggested that wild turkeys eat ticks, which is good, but there's an awful lot of ticks because there's an awful lot of deer.
Yeah, and we're all connected. I mean, I think that's one of the really important lessons. If we take away their habitat, they got to come someplace. And so they're going to come and live with us. But making that ecosystem unbalanced
Right.
is where, it creates the problem. They're bringing their ticks with them. They're bringing their Lyme's disease with them, which, I mean, it's frightening, really. And we have to really take a better approach to understanding the problem, I think. I think we're all so busy worried about, day-to-day life and our texts and I think we really have to kind of wake up to getting it across that we have to really make a sustainable planet. And it's for our good. It's not just for some lemur in Madagascar, but it's for everybody.
The
How do you stop the deforestation though? That's such big business and political and money. That's one of the biggest problems with these.
It is a very, very big problem.
How do you
And,
really
we've
stop
done it. Well, I did it by getting tourism to replace logging. They were making more money by being tourist guides than they were by logging. So even if somebody came and tried to hire them, they'd say, no, I got all these clients, I got to go. They just, it just changed the way they thought about the forest. The forest suddenly had value.
Right.
And I think if the forest doesn't have value, then they're on the brink of extinction themselves. I mean, these people are really poor. You got to speak to that abject poverty first. And we did it by educating people. I mean, and when I arrived in my region, 30 years ago, I mean, people had 3 years of education if they had any. Because I've been providing solid incomes for the local people for 30 years, we're starting to have people go to college.
Yeah.
Not just finish high school, but go to college. And I can brag that we actually had 4 PhDs in environmental sciences. And they're going to come back. I'm going to hire them because, wow, how great is that? I'm getting a PhD is really hard in the States, but in Madagascar, it's extremely hard. So in one generation, you can change things.
Right.
And so let's have a think tank to think about how we're going to change things in a way that'll be sustainable over time. I mean, maybe we can set up some electric car factories in some of these remote areas next to the places where there's rainforest. Maybe we can, tourism certainly works, and we're all dying to get back on those planes, actually. I am anyway. So I can see a little bit more of the world and get back to Madagascar and get to work again. I think it's very important that we really come to the grips with the fact that we've done a miserable job of being stewards, and it's about time to change things. Look at North Carolina. North Carolina used to be all deforested. For what? For tobacco, right? They deforested North Carolina for tobacco. And the soil of North Carolina, I lived there 8 years, is like rainforest soil. It's red clay. And everybody said you couldn't reforest it again. Well, now if you go to Madagascar, you have red clay, and it's not reforested yet. But in North Carolina, you have, if you fly over it, you have so much forest. So yes, we can restore. Now, the president of Madagascar has realized that has realized that reforestation is very important. But he doesn't realize yet is you just can't plant any old trees. What you have to plant has got to be endemic trees. Why? Because the whole ecosystem depends upon those trees. And what we've done is we've actually started to do the reforestation with endemic trees and then put high value crops. That's vanilla. That's wild pepper. Oh, we got the best wild pepper in the world. The pepper people came and tested it. It's the best in the world. And we can grow it in our reforestation plots. And we've training people how to grow it and how to harvest it. And we're helping with markets. I mean, this is some of the most important conservation right now is how do you make that rainforest sustainable? How do you make it worth more to those local people, those poor people? How do you make it worth more alive than dead? You know, and if we can continue to do this, it'll be fine. And so I'm trying to talk to the Chan Zuckerberg crew to, you know, yes, we can do the genomics, but we also have to do a little bit more of the conservation aspects. You know, a portion of that grant should go to saving the forests.
Mhm.
The
But
pepper is pepper that you put on the table on food, or pepper as in peppers?
actually, there's both, but the new discovery is the wild pepper. It's like black pepper that you grind,
Like
but
peppercorn.
it's
Peppercorn. Okay.
peppercorns, but it's the highest quality now in the world.
Are you taking
So
orders?
we're yeah, a good idea.
Yeah.
Yes, I should. At the end, where there will be a hat goes around, and you could
Yeah.
put your
I'll buy some
order in the
vanilla
hat.
in a heartbeat.
Pat,
Okay.
on Wednesday, and you might ask your friend this, the one that you spoke to about the bats, but John Epstein is going to be doing a Zoom class with us, and he's a specialist in diseases that humans catch from
Mhm.
bats.
Yes.
So
Yes, I know his
if you're
work.
around and you'd like to join us, I'm sure you'd be welcome.
Yes,
Oh,
and
that'd be
also
great. That's
Liliana,
okay.
if she wants to
Yeah.
as well. I'll send you the email. Pat.
Yeah, send me the email and send it to Liliana too, and maybe we both can
Yeah.
tune in. That's a
Yeah.
great thing about Zoom, though. I mean, that's a great thing
Mhm.
about COVID is it allows us to just be sitting home or wherever and hear all these great lectures. I've actually stormed in on quite a few of them because you really don't have to go anywhere. You just sit
Yeah.
and listen. These are very famous and also to bring guest lectures into my classes. I mean, Richard Leakey is going to talk to my class on tomorrow. He's talking tomorrow,
great.
and he's
Ooh,
in Nairobi.
I gotta get him.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
pretty. I'm very excited for that, and they're so excited. They want to bring all their friends to class. Maybe they'll pay attention, right? Now,
Oh,
Richard is a fantastic speaker, as you
Yeah.
all know.
if he has any interest in doing something for us, please pass the address on to Liz.
I have his address. I used to work for him, so
Okay.
I'll ask him.
Yeah, it'll
I
be
can
great.
ask him. Someone asked, Jody asked, can we get the link to your class tomorrow?
Okay, well, Jen, if Jen is still on, Jen has the link. Jen
think
Gilday
she's
is my personal assistant, my right-hand woman who makes
I'm here.
everything happen for me.
Elizabeth, I'll send you the link for tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? I mean, I could talk to you all day, but any other questions? I don't see any other questions. You know, the one thing I do want to mention, Dr. Wright, is I was reading, I don't know, a few months ago about the problem in the Amazon with the president and the deforestation. It's just horrendous. Is there any fixing that? Is it too late, you know?
I mean, really, one of the things you have to do is change that president.
Yeah.
And I mean, he has been a disaster.
Yeah.
But that's not ours to do. The Brazilian people have to do that.
Yeah.
Because if you have the leadership from the top that's destroying the rainforest and also the COVID, I mean, it's just running rampant in Brazil. I think if it's like number one now, it's either India or Brazil. And I don't think there's much we can do because we can write letters to our congressmen to try to put pressure on Brazil.
Yeah.
That might help.
The last
But-
I heard, they were tearing down the equivalent of a Central Park every day.
I mean, yeah,
Horrendous.
every
Oh,
day.
Sickening.
So
Just
sad.
sickening.
And you know, I know that forest so well. It is so beautiful. And it's just like, I mean, all those animals.
Yeah.
It's just
And the
terrible.
people, the indigenous people that have been
Oh,
living there.
yeah. The people
Oh.
there are unbelievable. I don't know that you read my book, but I actually was so deep in the heart of the rainforest in the Amazon that we had uncontacted people there. I'd never seen
Wow.
contact and absolutely uncontacted people. Nobody could talk to them because nobody had a language and
Right.
they share with them. And it's really does that because they don't think like we do at all. And I remember coming back from, we were ordered by the government not to speak to them, not to do anything with them. But they did read the government edicts. They came into our research camp and they would lie on their side because they didn't know about chairs or anything. They would lie on the ground on their side and watch us every day like we were monkeys. It was so weird because
Oh,
we
gee.
were monkey watchers and we had somebody watch us.
Mhm.
And then they came and tried to communicate that they wanted to do trade. They wanted salt and they wanted aluminum pots.
Mm.
They had and fish hooks. Those are the three things they wanted
they
more
wanted.
than anything. And they brought us fish, huge fish that they caught in the river
Wow.
to trade. And of course, we weren't allowed to trade, but if you're dealing with those kinds of bows and arrows and stuff, and these are uncontacted and they get mad at you, they could just kill us all. It wouldn't have been hard for them to do that because we didn't have any kind of weapons.
Mhm. Yeah. Amazing. Oh, did we lose her? I think we lost her.
Is Pat there?
Jen, did we lose her? Oh, I see her face. I don't see Dr. Wright.
I went mute again.
There you are.
Yeah. So yes, in Brazil, there are outstanding people that reach back 12,000 years in their cultures. And, we don't want to lose them either. And, their incredible genetic diversity, all of their medicinal uses of the plants in the Amazon, there's so much we don't want to lose. So maybe we should all write to our congressman and ask them to tell Biden that the Secretary of State should have a special trip to Brazil.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that might help.
I wonder if COVID's there.
I don't know his feeling. Oh, it's
I mean,
there.
with the animals, I meant, sorry, with the animals. Oh, wait, we lost her again. Dr. Wright, are you there? Hang on, let's see.
She's now the co-host.
I'm back and I don't know what we're doing.
There you are.
But this is my emails. Yeah, okay, I'm back.
We have a question.
Brazil has a problem
With the animals?
with the people and the animals,
Yeah.
some of the animals.
Ed has a question. Ed Metzendorf?
Yeah, hi, thank you, Dr. Wright. This has been fascinating. I just wanted to say that a year ago, October, my wife and I went to Africa. This was before the pandemic. We went to Tanzania and to Kenya. And we just had a wonderful trip, seeing all the various different animals, living their lives in their environments, And I think everybody needs to have an experience like that to see how the animals live on our planet, just like we live on our planet. My wife and I would never go to a zoo again because, that's where the animals are contained in these artificial environments and they're not living their lives as they're supposed to. So I'm just saying that it's a very enriching experience to go on a trip like that. And I can see you've done that, of course, with the lemurs and in Madagascar, you're seeing the lemurs in their habitats, the way they live. And, it's just an important lesson for all of us.
It is, it really is. And I know it's very hard for me also to see animals in zoos, but zoos have been trying zoos have really changed. And
Oh, we lost you. Oh, did we really lose her? Jen? There she is again.
What's happening?
And there are,
We keep losing you.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. But anyway, there are zoos that are trying to save habitat and save the animals in the wild, and I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
You know, the Bronx Zoo has done some amazing things at saving habitat, especially in Asia.
Mhm.
Right.
Also in Madagascar, they have.
Yeah, it's not working very well right now.
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
This
Well,
is,
thank
you know,
you.
Thank you so
Cape
much.
Cod, right?
Pat, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Through the up and down with the internet. And we thank you for taking your time. I don't know if she's still here. Did she leave?
Elizabeth, I sent you the link for
Okay.
Richard Leakey. Guys,
Thank
check
you.
out our website, centervalbio.com,
Okay,
and you can read all about us.
okay, great.
This is .org.
She's
Thank you
back
very
on.
much.
So thank you again.
Centervalbio.org.
Is she there?
Okay, bye-bye to everybody.
Thank-
Next time, I hope it's in person.
Okay.
Thank you,
Right.
Dr.
Goodbye.
Wright. Thank you.